Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 140. I've got Scott Sibley of SHAmory. He's a Bitcoiner, and he's makes educational Bitcoiners for children. He's also a father with a cute little 2-year-old, I think. So yeah, how you doing, Scott?
I'm doing good, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. How'd you get into Bitcoin?
Yeah, so our story starts back in kind of late 2017, early 2018. So sounds crazy, but I guess a couple cycles ago, and just typical story of seeing number go up, wanting to dive in and see what's going on, and then luckily enough caught enough of my attention and my wife's attention to be able to stick around all these years later and keep learning and being part of the space.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. So yeah. So you've now been through 2 bull markets. So if you've been through 2 bull markets, I think you're here to stay. That's a pretty good rule. Yeah. So, and of course, since then you got your little girl, and so you decided you were going to make educational materials for kids regarding Bitcoin. What inspired that exactly?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. So we have she's actually 4.5. Actually, you'll correct anybody who just says she's 4, as typical kids do.
Sorry, yeah.
No, you're good. And so it was kind of in that 2018, 2019 timeframe. My wife and I had been married for a couple of years, and we're at the beginning stages of wanting to start a family of our own, and realized as that time came, we'd want to be able to teach our children about Bitcoin and financial education at large, since that's something that for the most part goes untouched on in traditional schooling. And so being able to create something ourselves was kind of our mission. So April of 2020 is when we launched SHAmory. It was our card game was the first product. And then, to your point, we've expanded from there to a couple different books and a line of products all centered around some Bitcoin monster characters that we've created. But the inspiration really was the fact just simply that we were going to be creating a family of our own and wanted to be able to find ways to easily teach our future kids about Bitcoin. And going back 5-6 years, there really wasn't much out there to make that happen. So we decided to create it ourselves.
Yeah, I suspect there probably aren't Bitcoin being geeky. It's probably a lot of single guys, but yeah, it seems like these things do happen when you have kids. What do you think of some of the other stuff out there? Like, I know there's that book by the Bitcoin Rabbi. There's also, of course, not necessarily Bitcoin, but the Tuttle Twins series. Were those kind of your inspiration for this, or where do you draw your creative inspiration?
Yeah. So at the time, the Bitcoin Rabbi book was really one of the maybe 2 or 3 things that were out there. So that definitely was inspiration. We had purchased a copy just to see what that was like. Had a chance to connect with the Bitcoin Rabbi early on and be able to pick his brain about what worked, what didn't, et cetera. And so that was definitely part of it. But going back to 2018, it was few and far between. The Tuttle Twins, like you mentioned, over the past few months, have released their first Bitcoin focused little snippet, which is nice to see. But between 2018 and now, besides ourselves, there's been other groups that have come on and started creating similar type content, whether it's games. There's a Hodl Up is another awesome one that's out there, or books, or just other products that are not just for kids, but really just making Bitcoin fun and low stakes and non-scary, if you will, just kind of something that people of all ages can pick up and start interacting with in different ways. I think is awesome, and we love working with the other people in the space doing the same thing.
Oh yeah, people doing stuff for kids are usually some of the coolest people you find. Yeah, are your games mostly are they mostly just board games that you can play without plugging anything in, or are they?
Yeah. So our game is a card game, so it's a physical card game, and then our books are physical books. And then all our other products are physical too, and we've purposely gone that route to begin with, just since Bitcoin itself is obviously a heavily digital world of products, and so being able to have a physical side to it, I think, is a benefit as well, especially since these are products targeting kids and families. And so being able to get them away from screen time and that sort of thing and bring the families together while they're playing or reading a book or whatever it is they're doing together is another side benefit of the types of products that we've been creating.
Yeah, maybe it's just because I'm older. I just can't see taking some games to the online world. It's a I learned to play bridge at 11, and just like I want to play this with real people. I don't want to. Of course, you can go online anywhere to play it, but it's yeah, and they're pretty. So is it general? So is this generally what is your general age range? I mean, does it start maybe at 4 years old or?
Yeah, so the game is good, kind of that 4 to 5 age range, all the way up through adults. So it is something that adults can play. We have drinking game instructions that are out there, so it can really spice it up. And then the 2 books that we have are really targeted at kind of that toddler audience.
Yeah.
Since that's when we wrote them, our daughter was in that age range, and now that she's a little older, I suspect our next book would probably be written at that next level, up from there, and kind of just keep creating things like that.
So maybe books where the kids have to be able to count to 10, or things like that, or.
Yeah, so similar to the first book we wrote it's called Goodnight Bitcoin, so similar to Goodnight Moon. So if people are familiar with that type of storyline, and being able to go through that, and in our case, it tells the story of Satoshi and how creating Bitcoin. And then the second story that we wrote was if you give a monster a Bitcoin, so play off of if you give a mouse a cookie. Excuse me, you have to give a mouse a cookie. So those sorts of similar rhyming styles. Telling a fun story for that, say, 0 to 3 or 4 age audience.
Yeah, that's really. I'm really glad to see some amazing stuff out there. Is there much in this about economics or politics, or is it pretty much apolitical? I mean, what are some of the fears kids might have about Bitcoin?
I'm not sure that the nice thing is with the kid side of things, they don't really have fears. So Bitcoin is just another thing that's out there. Our daughter, like you saw in Texas, she's with us at the conference. She makes bracelets that people can come in and buy, and for donations, she has her own Lightning wallet set up to her. It's just another thing. So there's the fear side of it is something only on the adult side that you really have to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, is there any? How, for example, do you put economics or politics in, or do you just keep it apolitical or not really economical? How do you?
Yeah, we definitely don't touch on any political side of things for the most part. And economical, I guess you touch on, since we're talking about there's lines in the book like talking about the Bitcoin money supply being 21 million. So little low stakes things like that, I think you would consider economics, obviously, but from the child's point of view, they're not really thinking of it like that, since it's such a simple and
If nothing else, though, I do think kids maybe at some age are aware. It's like, mommy and daddy don't like it when prices go up. Maybe things like that. But that might be something that kids understand. But that's about it. It's
no, I agree.
Do kids do kids understand that when you go buy food at the grocery store, that the grocery store has to buy food from somebody else too? That kind of thing. It's
no, I think it's nice. I mean, from the time our daughter was an infant, she's always gone grocery shopping with us, so she knows that aspect of going to the store, looking for some things are on sale, some things aren't on sale, seasons, when things are in stock and that sort of stuff. And so, to your point, they start understanding it as long as the adults around them are providing them that.
Or something like, well, gee, daddy, gas is $3.50 over there, but it's $3.40 over here. So go buy the gas. Yeah, it's I don't know. I need to look up this video, but there's this video. There's a video of a dog in Colombia, of all places, and the dog would go into a cookie store, and he would always have a leaf with him, and he would put a leaf on the counter, and the people would give him a cookie, and it was like the dog was learning the basics of money.
That's crazy. I haven't seen that video, but that's funny.
Yeah, a dog. I mean, I give a leaf, I get a cookie. It's like, and of course it's like the dog would come back at the same time every day too for his cookie. It was such a wild story. It's because most dogs that might be the most economics the dog would think about. But it's pretty wild. Yeah. So what do you think? What kind of lessons do you think might be older? I mean, since it sounds like you're basically making stuff as your little girl grows. And so yeah, what kind of lessons do you think you'll introduce at a later age, or no?
That's I think getting more into maybe the excuse me, got to
Yeah,
tickle my lips, as you know, coming over
yeah,
off the cold. Getting more into the details of where Bitcoin came from. Right now she understands, she has a QR code. When people scan that QR code, it's going to a Lightning wallet that's hers. But obviously we're managing those, the keys and the custody of all that stuff for her at this point in time. But as she grows, we're going to want to hand that over to her and let her interact with it,
yeah.
that sort of thing. So being more hands-on, I think, would be a big thing.
Yeah, do you have little things that like little controls where you can kind of watch what your kids are doing with their wallets, or because you don't want your kids trying to, because obviously think people might try to sell things the kids don't need, or it's a
Yeah, exactly. No, I
yeah,
think those are things that we'd have to think about. We're lucky at this point. She's
yeah,
only 4, so she's not out there buying things herself. But to your point, I think, as wallets evolve, I'm sure there'll be those stopgaps, no different than how you can do that on I guess, a debit card or a credit card today, and being able to put those warnings and alerts and that sort of thing, to make it, family friendly and let the kid have some sense of freedom, while at the same
yeah.
time being able to walk them through learning how it's all used in a safe and a responsible way.
Yeah, and you learn other little things, like maybe when the first time your kid maybe walks into a grocery store to buy a candy bar or something, or I remember we lived close enough. My mother would, and granted, this doesn't really apply now, but my mother would send me to the post office to go buy stamps. It's just learning how to count change and things like that. And
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
yeah,
And she knows the different forms of paying, like paying with
yeah,
dollars or paying with Bitcoin and that sort of thing. So just, going back to that point, just bring your kids around those sorts of things as much
yeah.
as possible, not just Bitcoin related, but just financial related, or just, you know, living your life and what it takes to be an adult. The kids are going to pick up on it the more you expose it to them, and you'll be surprised how fast they learn.
Yeah, they do learn fast, and I can remember also, boy, showing my age, when you could actually put a quarter into a machine and get a can of Mountain Dew. But yeah, that shit, you can't get it for a quarter anymore. But uh,
No, that's for sure.
and then of course, that made it easy because it was just a quarter. It didn't. But that's a good question. What kind of lessons do you just teach your children about money at this point, and when do you start teaching those lessons?
Yeah, we started at a very young age with not just money related, but just learning, and
Yeah,
kind of had the mind frame that they're sponges, and they're only going to go as far as you challenge them. So, my wife and I have always pushed Charlotte, not just learning about Bitcoin, but just learning, whether it's counting,
hmm,
color, shapes, reading,
yeah,
arithmetic. He's been able to be in theory ahead of the game from a young age, just because we've pushed her and been able to expose her to those things. And it doesn't take much. It can be 30 minutes a day of sitting down and walking through a different curriculum with your kid when they're 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and you'll be surprised how fast they learn and get that comfort level of being able to do these things, and they'll start surprising you on that side.
I do sometimes wonder, because I think we're getting into a world where it's maybe getting harder to teach kids about money, because I mean, kids don't carry credit cards. So really the only thing that, kids can go in with is cash, and it's now getting to a point where a lot of places are almost hostile toward cash. I mean, how do you deal with that nowadays? I mean, or they don't want cash, or they're completely incompetent at dealing with cash anymore. I mean, they don't know, hardly. I mean, some of these cashiers hardly know the difference between a quarter and a nickel, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess I would think, I mean, our daughter obviously isn't old enough to have to do this yet, but I think most kids actually probably do have either a form of a credit card or a debit card that
Yeah,
their parents probably manage. So they're probably not handling cash, or, if they're buying things between friends, they're using Venmo or Cash App or something like that.
yeah,
Uh, that's probably the most common way that is happening, from peer to peer standpoint. Hopefully, as a Bitcoiner, you would think that, that's going to get overtaken by things like lightning and going back to the question
Yeah.
around wallet and making that easier. Because, as Charlotte's generation grows up, she's gonna be native to those sorts of forms.
Yeah.
Do you want to Venmo me, or do you want to send me something to my Lightning wallet? Is going to be a common question, probably
Yeah.
in the not distant future.
Yeah. And well, and I don't know what kind of limits you'd have on that, because obviously, if you have a kid, if I had a child under 10 and my child spent, $100 on anything, I'd want to know why'd you spend $100 on something? It's obviously I wouldn't care if it was an adult, but you want to
Yep.
let them get more responsibility as you go on, but you don't want them to, because they could blow money really fast at that age.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If they have it,
There has to be that level of responsibility and
Yeah.
oversight, especially when you're talking about that age. So, it's a balancing act, but I think for the most part, the transactions, like you said, they're going to be digital, and hopefully that digital nature will start gradually going towards the Bitcoin side of things too.
Yeah. I didn't think of this, but and maybe they don't, but do you ever get the various scammers trying to target kids? If the kids got even $100, or maybe they just figure kids aren't worth it, or does it? I certainly, get them myself through email or stuff like that. What do you teach kids about that? Because it certainly can, the crypto space can certainly be a minefield.
Yeah, no, for sure. We haven't ever seen that. Obviously,
Yeah.
my daughter's too young; she doesn't have email or anything like that for herself. But
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll come to the point. I think it kind of goes back to your earlier question, where what sorts of things will you teach your kids as they grow from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8. But going back to, I'm sure everybody's heard of people type in your private keys here, your seed words here, those sorts of things. You're going to have to talk to your kids, like, if somebody ever asked you that, don't ever do it. Getting those baseline rules in place to make sure they understand what you should never do, no matter who's asking,
Yeah.
is probably part of it.
Oh
But
yeah. No matter who's asking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was 12. I was 12 years old, and I remember watching that movie War Games. You know what movie I'm talking about?
I don't think I've ever seen it, but I've heard of it.
He breaks into the back doors of the nuclear testing, although it's not an explicit message, it's not really an obvious message it's an obvious message to me, but there's the moral of that whole story is don't use stupid passwords.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's something kids think about, or because I think kids, I can imagine kids would get very creative with passwords. Maybe too creative, but you get to that point.
I don't think it's something, sadly, most adults think about. So I think a lot of times they're falling into those traps. So the kids are either susceptible. But it would be awesome if as whether they're going to traditional school or charter schools or homeschool, but those are all the sorts of curriculum and classes they need to have. Like, how do you manage your passwords? How do you save those passwords? How do you use two-factor authentication? What you shouldn't do for all these scenarios. Those are the things that the kids really truly need, especially as the world continues to evolve, and the AI stuff is only going to get easier for people to get fooled.
Oh yes. Do you ever worry that maybe obviously we're older, we didn't have as nearly as much exposure to all this, that maybe there's do you think this is really I grew up when there were still 10 stations on the TV, and there was a landline phone in the house with rotary we still had rotary phones. That maybe that kids are almost too connected, and it might be better off for them just to put the stuff down every once in a while and just learn how to focus without the screens. How do you manage that as a father?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a balancing act. In our particular case, we manage it a certain time and length during the day where she's allowed to have screen time, which typically consists in her favorite thing to do is watch a couple of her favorite shows, which is that's perfectly fine. We all like being entertained that way. And outside of that, it's other things to do. So it's just I think it's naive to think that kids aren't going to be on screens, really for the rest of their life, because that's just the way that the world is. So it's, I think, doing more harm to them if you're completely
Yeah.
hiding from that side of things. So it's
Oh
just
yeah.
trying to get that balance and making
Yeah.
sure that it's a healthy amount, and it's controlled, and they understand that it's a privilege to be able to have this time, and it seems to work
Yeah.
out.
It's a balance, sometimes I wonder, what we gain, but what we lose, I mean,
Yeah.
my it seems like, sometimes you have these things that kind of become a crutch. My dad could multiply 2-digit numbers in his head as fast as I could punch them into a calculator. And it was just, like, our kids still, our people still going to be able to do that. It's maybe they don't need to, but it's definitely, you kind of hope they can learn that stuff without it. I mean, what other educational materials do you think are really great for kids out there nowadays? We mentioned some of these other books, or what are some things that you really think are great out there for kids nowadays? I assume are you homeschooling or unschooling your daughter, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are, and so she's, from a technically she'd be classified as being in pre-K or TK, depending on what
Yeah.
they call it. So she's on the younger side of things, but we've been doing curriculum with them, kindergarten, first grade curriculum with her for over a year now,
Yeah.
and so there's a great set of curriculum. I don't know the name of it. My wife's the one who found it, that we've been utilizing, that really walks through, the core subjects. Obviously, they're not teaching about Bitcoin and that yet, but just, reading, writing, science, language arts, math. Her favorite subject is
Yeah.
math, which is nice. And so being able to find a set of curriculum that works for you is nice. And then next year, she'll be old enough to be able to supplement that with a local, it's kind of call it a charter school. It's not really a charter school, but a spot where a couple days a week she can go sign up for different types of classes,
Yeah.
whether it's robotics or drama or whatever, to be able to get exposure from learning from other people, being with other kids, that sort of stuff. So she'll have kind of a hybrid learning environment, which I think we're excited about. Seems to work. So between the homeschool side of things, that offsite school, and then she's heavily involved in playing sports. Being able to get that well-roundedness of physical activity, educational activity,
Yeah.
and being socialized is something that we seem to, we feel good about going with in her particular plan.
Maybe you've heard of what they call the free range kids movement. I mean, are you pretty, you know what I mean by that?
I could guess. I've never heard it classified that way.
Yeah. I think in some ways it's the reaction to what seems to be becoming a somewhat overprotective society. It's like, like my grandfather walked 6 miles to school each way as a first grader, 2 miles, and nowadays it's like, you can't let kids do that, and it's like, yes, you can. And in a way, it's maybe, not, kids aren't going out and learning to do things, like they're not doing things independently like they used to.
Yeah, no, it's definitely
Yeah.
different on that front for sure.
Like if like if a bunch of kids just go out to the basketball court and start playing basketball on their own versus playing basketball that's, run by mom and run by all the parents, that kind of thing.
Yep. No, it's a different world. I mean, I think it probably also depends on what part of, speaking of America in general, since that's where we're both located, just where you're located probably changes there. Where if you're more rural, you can probably still have some of those aspects. Being able to, walk a mile down the street to your grandparents' house or something like that. Whereas, we're in San Diego, it's a bigger city, and so you gotta kind of watch out for what comes with that, on the letting your kids be alone side of things. So definitely,
Yeah.
dependent on where you're physically located.
I think it also helps if your kids just grow up in a more walkable neighborhood, or a neighborhood where it's easier to walk, as opposed, I grew up in a small town. It's it was easy to go out and just walk somewhere. Certain places I didn't always go, but that's again how you learn. You just learn to cross the street same way you learn anything else. You know, any yeah. What can you tell me a little bit more about what is the product that you're most proud of?
I guess I would have to say the card game, since only because
Yeah.
that was our first one, and it kind of was the most complex, having to walk through, a balance of gameplay and making it engaging and fun, combined with making sure that from a
Yeah.
technical and educational factor, it was actually, in the case of the game, it's teaching about Bitcoin mining, which there's a lot of complexity that goes into that. But being able to simplify that in a very low stakes and engaging way, it took about a year to go through that and make it come to life. And so I think just the fact of the complexity around it, combined with the fact that it was kind of what got us out there in the first place. So kind of, maybe the age old adage, you always remember your first love. And so that being the case, it kind of put us on the map and allowed us to do everything else.
Yeah, that's true. It's, you're, yeah, the first, like, you'll remember your first article published, or remember your first anything. Yeah, that's usually how it goes. So, and that minimum age is maybe what, 3 or 4 to play that game?
Yeah, we'd say 4 is a good age.
Yeah.
So the game plays very similar to the game of memory. So where you're flipping
Okay.
over cards and using your memory to remember where matching ones are. So if your kid can play memory, then they can play the game. And you need to know nothing about Bitcoin going in. Watch the video on how to play, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah. How many can play this game? Is it at the same time?
Yeah, so 2 or more. Our sweet spot is kind of 2 to 5. You could have as many as you want, but from a play, we'd put kind of that 2 to 5 range is a good kind of barrier.
Okay. Yeah. So you just put out the cards. Yeah. Since some of these are educational, do you possibly get adults buying these games because they don't understand Bitcoin either, but they figure, well, here's a way to learn about Bitcoin. I'll buy this, buy this kid's game, and I can learn from that.
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
you might have a market outside of kids, or any, might go to any age. Just,
Yeah, and honestly, when we launched the game to begin with, it was targeted at kids and adults. And then subsequently, when we wrote the books, which were kids' books, it then kind of, for lack of a better word, pigeonholed us in kind of that kids market, which is great. But the game itself is good for kids or adults. We've had mining companies purchase the game to be able to use as a tool to onboard new employees. A company in Texas at the conference we were at together that came over and bought a bunch to be able to utilize in that way. So yeah, the game itself and the books, we hear stories about, these books are for kids who can't read yet. And so maybe an aunt, an uncle, or a grandparent is watching your child, and the grandparent isn't a Bitcoiner yet, but the kid wants them to read you one of these books written in a way that they start learning things and stimulates conversation as well. And so while they are kids' books, they are things that make it easy for anybody to digest.
Yeah, I can see that too, especially if you have some people that are just, afraid of technology and non-technical. If you want to at least, and maybe that person, in some department doesn't have to know about mining, but you at least want them to understand, yeah, this is what the company does, here's how it works. So they at least have some, they know some basics,
Exactly.
which would be good, you give on board your new employees. And you wrote some stories. What do you think are your best stories out there?
I'd like both of those books about the same. I think I couldn't pick a favorite between those two from the stories that we wrote.
Yeah. So you think both. So you like both your stories. Yeah. What's usually what I most do these what kind of conflicts happen in the stories? I mean, is there, is it protagonist, antagonist, or what usually, or is it just a situation, or
Yeah, so the first one we wrote, Goodnight Bitcoin, there's a story of Bitcoin being created. And so the conflict really comes from the fact it talks about Satoshi and Hal coming together to create a new form of money, which is obviously Bitcoin. And then in the middle of it, there's a line talking about how the other characters thought it would be impossible to do. So it's kind of that feeling of an impossible act. And then Satoshi and Hal bringing on a group of friends to be able to make this together. And then obviously then Bitcoin is in the wild. And so that's the conflict in story one, just kind of being told, it's impossible, and then being able to do it. And then the story in the second one is kind of a back and forth around the good that Bitcoin can do in various ways. So for example, there's some lines around the difference between, Bitcoin only having 21 million versus fiat having a quadrillion, or whatever word we use in there.
Yes.
Different aspects. So it's kind of a page by page basis, taking an aspect of Bitcoin and showing how it's better than the current world.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What do you think this will look like when kids get? What do you think these things might look like when your kids do get older? If you start making stuff for older kids, or
Yeah, I don't know what they would look like. I think in many cases, in a perfect world, these things all kind of just become normalized, and um, they start looking like what you would imagine they learn every day today. Just no different than math curriculum or science curriculum, where there's stuff out there for them to go and see, and it's not something different. It's just something that's part of your growth and learning how to
yeah.
financially independent. So it's videos and YouTube and kind of going flipping from the earlier answer where it's both physical products but also digital, because that's the way it has to be. We've purposely created all of our products using the monster characters that are part of everything, and so in our minds we see these characters kind of having a life outside of our ecosystem as well. So whether it's things like video games or movies, television, just seeing these characters come to life in various ways is also another way to get that engagement and start bringing people in.
Or maybe even a Bitcoin cartoon series.
Yep, exactly. And hopefully with
yeah.
the advance of everything being done on the AI side of things, it's going to become easier for those sorts of cartoons and digital aspects to come to life. If I can go in there and just start referencing our characters and turn it into a cartoon story coming to life on computer or your TV, as opposed to paying thousands of dollars to somebody to animate these things, is going to make it a lot easier for a creative like myself and my wife to be able to go and have those sorts of that content come to life.
What are some more? Do you think there are any more adult books out there that you think, well, maybe not a 4 or 5-year-old, but maybe a 10 or 11-year-old could read? I mean, economics in one lesson might be one book that kids could read, but are there any other books that you think kids could read? Maybe at the middle grade level or not. I mean, when do you think kids could start reading? Maybe about something more serious.
I think there's not a particular book that comes to mind. It could be case by case, but some of that goes back to their reading comprehension as a whole, and so how fast have they started to read. And once they're there, then like most things, if it's something they're interested in, they'll pick it up and read it. So I don't know the exact age. It's really just more of an interest level and their motivation. I don't know. Speaking for myself, like when I was back in school, I didn't really enjoy learning because I was being told I had to learn something. But when it comes to something like Bitcoin, I chose to go down that path to be able to learn and listen to podcasts or read a book or, read an article or whatever it is. So that's the preferred way to start bringing people in.
I mean, there were some really great economists out there, but they wrote for the economic audience. They wrote for they wrote their books for other college professors, but then some other economists were able to write, books that the general public could read. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was referring to as.
Yeah.
Any other books that we mentioned the book by I can't remember the title of the book by the Bitcoin Rabbi. Any other and the Tuttle Twins? Anything else out there that you think's really good right now? Or
so there's another group. They've had a new book for a while, but the Bitcoin for Kiddos wrote a couple books for kids a few years back. So there's that. There's a few other games out there. So Hodl Up is a game that's targets kind of 14 and up. It's similar. The play is similar to Settlers of Catan. So they're out there as well. And then there's people also just doing things around kind of camps. And so there's a gentleman out of the DC area who has a background in after school STEM programs. And he, over the past couple of years, has been developing a Bitcoin specific STEM program that he's franchising across the nation. And so that would give, a sense of physical for kids to go, whether it's summer camps or holiday camps or after school, and bringing those sorts of things to life. So I think over the years to come, we're going to see a mixture of a lot of things come up, and there's some of it's already out there. And, even things like Me Premier Bitcoin. So they have their curriculum that's open source that you're able to go and get and work in.
For example, at what age do you think maybe you wouldn't want your kid doing this because of the electricity usage, but what age could your kid start setting up a node or something like that? I set up a Bitcoin node in my bedroom. Okay.
Yeah. No, I think that can be, there's kids out there that, they're doing robotics and
Yeah.
3D printing, and it's really no different than that. And so I think they could start doing those things at a fairly young age.
When my nephew was 10, I gave him a book on how to make his own web pages.
Nice.
I still remember that. It was it's kind of funny when you go from that, you go from that point where you stop buying the kids' books that have a lot of pictures, and most of these kids' books still are books, aren't they? I mean, they're not real. You can't really transfer kids' books to the electronic version as easily as you can transfer, novels and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's harder since mostly because of the images.
Yeah,
Kids like seeing those pictures as they're being
yeah,
read to. Otherwise,
yeah,
their attention isn't quite there yet, so it
yeah.
does make it harder.
There's a visual experience, that comes with the book, that you lose if you go to the phone. I'm just curious too. Since so many homeschoolers I know are, trying to get their kids to learn other languages. If you wanted to teach your kid another language at a young age, what would you recommend? Do you have any ideas on that, or not?
I don't. That's not a. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. So about a year ago, um, our daughter became very interested in learning sign language,
Oh,
which,
wow.
yeah, isn't a typical one that you would hear come up. And so my wife actually went and took a first semester a sign language course at the local community college, so she could learn it, and they kind of started learning it alongside each other. And so, that's a somewhat unique situation, but she still utilizes some of it to this day. And whether it's sign language or other languages, she hasn't gone down any pathways for speaking other languages just yet. But there's so many different tools out there. Obviously, Duolingo is a popular one that people utilize. I'm not sure their demographic when they kind of start targeting users. I'm guessing it's on the teenage or
Yeah,
18 things.
I have noticed that Rosetta Stone seems like they're more geared to the school market. That's one thing I've noticed. There's sometimes so they might be more geared to schools, and some might be more geared to the individual. It's there's a lot of programs out there too. Yeah, and I think some offer a lot of languages, but some are just Spanish. But it's definitely a time you can learn. I think sometimes there's just something that inspires them to, get on this and go. It's, they find a reason why they're interested, and then they just go with it.
Yeah, no, exactly. It always comes back around to that interest level, and that's going to make or
Yeah.
break whatever they're going at.
What other obstacles do you think you might run into with what are the biggest challenges that you face as a parent today that maybe we didn't face 40 years ago or 50 years ago?
Looking at the difference between, obviously the way I grew up and the way Charlotte does, it wasn't as common. Obviously, when I was a kid, if you heard somebody was going to be homeschooled, that was probably looked down upon, or
Yeah.
what kind of strange person is doing that. Whereas now, like you were talking about earlier, it's becoming more and more common, especially over the past few years,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
in the Bitcoin space. And so that's one big thing. But then I think part of the reason why that is becoming more common also has to do with, people being worried about not only what their kids are learning in school and if they're being adequately challenged, but also there's the safety side of it that comes up here in the States as well. So being able to both better your child for on the education while keeping them in a safer environment is something that I think is very different than, when, I was a kid in the 80s. That wasn't something we'd ever think about. And then obviously, going back to the conversation around the digital side of things, I was outside every day playing because there was no other option.
Yeah.
It was later on that, you got your first Nintendo or your first Game Boy.
Yeah.
But you had already kind of established, being outside with friends and riding your bike and, playing sports and all that stuff. And so there's definitely more of that for better and for worse. I mean, I couldn't imagine, we travel a decent amount, and being able to get on an airplane and, during that time, she can watch as many shows as she wants, just to, just like anybody else, you're bored out of your mind sitting on a plane. Whereas, 30 years ago, when you're getting on an airplane, you're just sitting there. Maybe you could read a book, or who knows what you would do with your kid. So, I mean, there are benefits as well, just being able to have that digital side when you're in movement like that, and keeping them engaged and happy.
Yeah.
So blessing and a curse.
You're a world schooler. I think that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, world schooling is great. Yeah, it's is it just mostly around the country or?
Both. And
Yeah,
so over the past, 6 or 8 months, it's, traveling to a handful of conferences, but we love traveling outside of the country. We haven't
yeah.
uh, done it as much over the past few months, just given the fact that our second baby's arriving here in about five
Oh
weeks.
yeah,
So we're on lockdown now until the little one arrives. But then once she does, we'll
yeah.
be able to spread our wings again a little bit more.
But also, let's say your baby's born in Mexico. Guess what? Your baby now has Mexican citizenship, and that could get you on the fast track.
That is a very true aspect. We are
Yeah,
about 30 miles away from the border.
definitely a way to go. That's it. Yeah, I mean, you're in San Diego. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, people tell me San Diego is the biggest small town in America. Sometimes,
There
although,
are aspects of that, depending on where you're at. But yeah, I'm born and raised here, and my wife's originally from Ohio.
oh yeah, I lived in Columbus for 6 years, so I certainly know Ohio. Yeah, it's a, and of course and of course if you want to fly in or go to Mexico, you just go across the border, and then you got that airport that'll take you anywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, you park in America. Also, I gotta say too, the San Diego airport is definitely one of my favorite airports. It is so easy to go in and out of that place.
Yes.
I mean,
Well, right now they demolished a whole side of it, so it's a nightmare currently. So got another year of construction. But generally, I know what you're saying.
a pretty old airport, because I know also it's the busiest single runway airport in America. I don't know if they're gonna think about maybe replacing it, which would be kind of unfortunate, but I just know how you get. I mean, I know I get off the plane and I'm outside and if I don't have luggage, I'm outside getting my Uber in 5 minutes. I mean, it's
Yeah. No.
that's just what's so cool about it. And it's, yeah, it's of course you're not that far away. You could, if you had, I guess, if you do take longer flights, maybe you might even just drive up to LAX and go from there. It's hard to say, but yeah, it's
No, we definitely have done that too. So between our airport, LA, and then like you said, there's the one in Tijuana, which makes traveling in Mexico
yeah.
very easy, which is nice.
Yeah, well, if you go to Mexico City or wherever, yeah, or go anywhere from there, yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience. Yeah, so yeah, I'm just curious, what's it like flying with kids nowadays? What do you got to do when you take kids flying? It's any tips for parents who might be thinking about taking their kids flying and what they need, what to be aware of,
I think the biggest tip that we always say is just start young, get
Yeah,
them used to it. Our daughter went on her first plane ride when she was 7 or 8 weeks old,
yeah,
flew back to Connecticut, and then did a little road trip and never really stopped from there. And so from literally, from being an infant till now, she's just gotten used to being on planes. And
yeah,
like I was mentioning earlier, being able to be okay with that tablet time or whatever it is while they're on the flight,
yeah,
in our mind is a perfectly fine thing. So make sure your battery's charged, bring snacks, depending on their age, pack an extra set of clothes in case there's some sort of accident on yourself. That's
yeah,
another thing that you want to have. But I think the biggest thing is literally just don't be scared to do it, and then the more you do it, you'll find your routine,
yeah,
and being able to get from point A to point B.
yeah.
It'll change now with having two of them, I'm sure, make it a little bit
Oh
more
yeah,
and that sort of thing. But we're just going to adapt and go from there. It's also nice. I think another tip is, depending on their age, once again, but like where we're at now, it's a lot easier to stay in like an Airbnb than a hotel where you can have a separate living space. Because when you're stuck
yeah,
in a hotel room, if the kid has to go to bed, then you're stuck kind of having the lights off and that sort of thing. Being able to not do much once
yeah,
they're in 7 o'clock or whatever their bedtime
yeah,
is. So that does kind of change your habits of where you're booking and what you're looking at.
yeah.
Being able to have that extra room to be able to have comfort in, that is another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and of course, once the second kids come, you'll have to. The second child comes eventually. You'll probably end up, having to take up two benches on the plane.
Exactly.
Because so many of them, when you have a mom and dad and the kid can sit in the middle, but then
Yep.
because so many planes, are that style of, one aisle, three on each side. But yeah,
Yep.
I should ask too, what airlines are particularly friendly or unfriendly to kids, or are they all pretty much the same? I bet they're not, but who knows?
We haven't found any, in the States, we typically travel Southwest a lot just because they have a lot of flights out of San Diego.
Yeah.
Never had any issues. They make it nice with the parent kid boarding right after the A's, so you don't have to worry about you're going to not sit together. So that's our main one. And then, but yeah, we haven't had any trouble with anything. Obviously, there does come a time, up until they're 2, you don't have to pay their ticket, so they can be on your lap. But if you're going, if you're making a longer international trip or something like that, you might think about even purchasing them if they're 1 or 2 year, under 2, just to give you that extra space and let them have a little more comfort too. But
and they've got plenty of leg room. They certainly and they got to go use the bathroom. But that's got to be interesting. But they probably I can imagine they enjoy flying.
Oh yeah, no, our daughter loves getting on the airplanes and going places and new spots.
Might inspire, and I always sometimes I see little kids like that. I say, "Yeah, are you going to be a pilot?" Might inspire them to become one. It's really amazing that we can go so many places and see the world. Well, this has been a pretty good conversation. Anything else you want to say before we go? And you got to tell us where we can find you on the net.
Yeah, no, awesome conversation. Glad we were able to connect up. Easiest place to find us is SHAmory.com. So SHAmory is the website. On social media, we're most active on Twitter. It's @PlayShamory. And then being able to, interact, answer questions, happy to connect with whoever that's out there.
Please like and subscribe. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Check out my Substack. I also have a novel called Escape from the Village. Thank you, Scott. I'm Chris Baker, and we're out.